Okay, it's noon with academic quarter, so I think we will start. Hello, everyone. My name is Tobias, and I work as a labor market analyst for the union Naturvetarna. We are one of 21 SACO unions, and we mobilize more than 36,000 workers with a degree in natural sciences. Today, I will try my best to guide you through a maze, also known as the life science labor market. And if you have any questions, I'd prefer that you wait until the end, but if you want me to clarify anything that I'm covering at the moment, you're more than welcome to raise your hand or send me a message during the presentation. So typically, employers, associations, and also other actors investigate the competence shortage by sending surveys to their member organizations or organizations of interest. Now, this approach has two major limitations, and the first one being all the biases that inevitably occur in surveys, plus the respondents' difficulty to fully recollect their past, but also their future demand for competence. The second one being the difficulty to achieve a scale that allows for drawing sector-wise conclusions. So if stated behavior falls short, what is superior? Well, observed behavior, because there's no gap between what we say that we need and what we show that we need. And that's why the gigantic open source database from JobTech is truly groundbreaking. And this database is estimated to hold more than 50% of all jobs on the Swedish labor market. And the period I've studied runs from 2014 to 2024. And during these years, the sample contains 6.2 million unique job ads. But the underlying workhorse for this study is something called a demand system, and that's also shown here on the slide. It basically maps the decision-making process an employer goes through when hiring someone new. To achieve a delimitation to the life science industry, we first filtered out 338 companies that clearly belong to the industry, and this is showcased here on the second level. And this step helps us avoid false positives from the broader healthcare sector. Next, on the third level, we see how the employer first determines what type of skill set they're after. Is it someone with expertise in production, for example, wet labs, in R&D, or in marketization? And that could be regulatory compliance, for example. And once that's decided, they move on to identifying the specific competences needed for the position. And that's shown on the fourth level, which contains 136 life science competencies. But before we dive into the life science labor market, we need to understand the underlying data and mechanisms of the labor market as a whole. And on this slide, we see the annual sum of unique job ads in the Swedish labor market. And as I said, altogether, the data is estimated to cover more than 50% of all job ads. And as you can see, there is a strong correlation between the economy's recessions and low numbers of available positions in 2014, 2020 during the pandemic, but also since 2023. And this shape of the graph between 2014 and 2024 is also found for industries that are sensitive to the state in the economy. So is the life science industry one of them? The answer is both no and yes, because during the pandemic in 2020, the life science industry was actually one of few industries showing signs of expansion. While job listings across the economy were declining, the life science industry did the opposite. It was growing and looking to hire even more people with natural science-based skills. And you can also see this here in the steep incline of the adjusted trend line. And this line represents a hypothetical scenario that puts extra weight on the share of positions requiring a specific cluster or group of competencies or experiences. And then job listings kept rising through 2021 and 2022, but in 2023 and 2024, we see a shift. The life science industry wasn't immune to the recession. So job listings declined and demand levels dropped back to the levels that we saw before the pandemic. And this is the same data, but it's plotted monthly. And here I only have one key takeaway, and that is when you're applying for jobs, you'll face the toughest competition and fewest amount of available position during the summer, from late April through July. So therefore, I encourage you to maximize your job seeking effort before and after the summer. Now, let's take a closer look at what skills are most in demand in the life science industry. Turns out that the most sought after skill is GMP, which stands for Good Manufacturing Practice. And it's a set of requirements for how medicinal products are tested, made, and sold. And these standards originate from the World Health Organizations, and there are, of course, regional versions of this, such as the EU GMP for the European Union. In second place, we have automation, and that can mean anything from programming in Python to applying existing AI systems to automate processes that might be prone to human error. And the third most sought after skill is quality assurance, or abbreviated QA. And that can mean anything from programming in, this involves compliance with regulation is what I wanted to say. Standardization initiatives, and of course, an eagle eye for details. Next, in fourth place, we find experience of project and process management. Then in fifth place comes the international standard ISO 13485. And in sixth place, we find the analytical technique chromatography. And then we have regulatory affairs, experience of laboratory work. And what's especially interesting is place number 9, medical technology. It's actually the only skill that's increased both in absolute demand, meaning it appears in more job ads in 2023 and 2024 than the previous 2-year period. And then in 10th place, we have experience working with small molecules, and followed by molecular biology experience and the technique antibody purification at 12th place. And as you may have experienced, there is an overwhelming variety of job titles out there, and the life science industry is no exception. So in total, we're looking at 2023, and that means we're looking at 1,800 job ads. And it turns out that they are spread across 254 job titles. And in this graph, you can see the Swedish job title that the employer is using in the listing on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, we see the translated equivalent job title. And it turns out that the most common job title is chemist or chemist in Swedish. And other common job titles are researcher in pharmacology, biomedical scientist, analytical chemist, and molecular biologist, followed by a few other job titles. And by grouping these job titles into broader categories, we were able to identify types of professions. And the most common type of profession is some sort of chemist, and it's recruited in every third job ad. Biologists appear in every 12th job ad, developers in 1 out of 14, and researchers in 1 out of 18 job ads. And these results, of course, focus on a 2-year period to reduce the impact of temporary fluctuations in demand, while also keeping the data relevant. But it also raises the question, of course, how does this compare with the previous 2-year period? And since the absolute number of available positions can vary across 2-year periods or even years, we focus on relative numbers when we're looking at changes in labor demand. So for example, are chemists making up a larger share of jobs today? And in this table, we can see that the number of vacancies fell from 121 in 2021 and 22 to 87 in 2023 and 2024. However, the share of chemist positions actually increased by 13%. And in 2021 and 2022, it was 4% of all ads recruiting chemists, while in 2023 and 2024, that number rose from 4% to 5%, meaning the increase is 1 percentage point. And for the other job titles, I have 3 key takeaways. So firstly, relative demand for most job titles are stable across time, and this is visible here in the table. And chemists, of course, are still most sought after. Secondly, we see a strong increase in demand for software developers, and they're found at the bottom of the table here. And the same goes for quality engineers and laboratory engineers. There's also a moderate increase in demand for validation engineers and biomedical scientists. And at the same time, demand for molecular biologists has declined. And the third takeaway is that tech competence is playing an increasingly important role in the life science industry. And I'll come back to this in the second part of the webinar. Now let's look at who's hiring the most natural scientists. The single largest employer is AstraZeneca, where some of the most sought after competences are bioinformatics, PK/PD, and automation. And AstraZeneca creates roughly 1 out of every 4th to 5th jobs in the life science industry. And this is not surprising considering it's not only the largest company in terms of workforce, but it's also 3 times as large as the second largest company. Still, despite their size, AstraZeneca, their share of all life science jobs has actually dipped slightly, as shown by the yellow arrow. The second largest employer is Plant Vision, and this company streamlines production for several life science firms, and their most sought after competences are, for example, compliance with regulations, and this is oftentimes IVDR, quality assurance, and automation. And what's interesting about Plant Vision is that we've seen an increase in both absolute terms, which is actual job listings, and as a share of all life science jobs. And Plant Vision now creates every 7th job opportunity in the life science industry. Moving on to Citiva, Sweden's second largest company in terms of workforce and the 3rd largest employer in 2023 and 2024. Despite its size, it shows a similar pattern to AstraZeneca with a declining share of all the listings during these 2 years. And in contrast, we see a slight increase in available positions coming from Fresenius and QMed. Fresenius is on 4th place and QMed is in 5th place. And altogether, we've identified 81 life science companies and 1 governmental agency, which was the Swedish Medical Product Agency, or Läkemedelsverket in Swedish, that were hiring during 2023 and 2024. And when I say hiring, I mean hiring natural scientists. What's worth noting about these results is that the database does not include Danish employers, for example, such as Novo Nordisk, Lundbeck, or Leo Pharma. And as a final caveat, Sobi, which is a large Swedish employer, is not connected to the database, meaning their listings are not included here, unfortunately. But where are these jobs located? Roughly 1 out of 3 jobs are found in the Uppsala region. And the second most common region is Västra Götaland, followed by Stockholm. And altogether, these 3 regions account for 8 out of 10 job opportunities. And during 2023 and 2024, jobs were created in 13 out of the 21 regions. And this actually makes the life science industry the most geographically concentrated industry for natural scientists in Sweden. Now, let's turn to why we're seeing this growing demand for automation and medical technology in recent years. This area will be covered more in detail in our upcoming report later this month. hopefully in a week or two. And it's going to cover something called data-driven life science, or abbreviated DDLS. And this is a term coined by SciLife Lab. So this subfield of life science refers to the integration of AI, synthetic biology, and autonomous systems to enhance pharmaceutical trials, medical technology, but also production. And since 2022, we've noticed a real boom in this field. Major investors such as Wallenberg Foundation, CAV, are redirecting more and more funding toward projects that integrate new technology in new ways. And this includes processing large data sets and using tools like machine learning. And the goal is oftentimes to make research both more efficient, but also pave the way for precision medicine, which often involves costly trials with small sample sizes. And one Swedish company leading the way is Accuray, and they have built a device that uses a large data set to deliver real-time diagnostics for cardiac diseases. And here in Sweden, we have access to extremely strong data, for example, molecular data or omics, but only a small part of it is handled effectively. And that means we're missing opportunities to make new discoveries, identify patterns, sometimes even try new hypotheses on old data. And this graph speaks for itself. This is where more and more research funding will go in the future, and we're already seeing this in our analysis. So there are many research projects at Swedish universities within this field waiting for you. And on the next slide, we'll take a closer look at what competences drive this change. So just like before, we looked at which competencies are most in demand, but this time specifically within the subfield of DDLS. Again, we've limited our analysis to 338 life science companies to keep the focus clear. And the slide shows the set of skills mentioned in job ads and also how they've been grouped into two main categories. We have life science skills on the left-hand side and tech skills on the right-hand side. And examples of life science skills are ATMP, biotechnology, transcriptomics, and also precision medicine. And examples of tech skills are health data, AI, Python, and Azure. And also, if an employer is recruiting someone knowing both skill sets, we call it a DDLS skill set. Here we can see the demand for labor in DDLS and that it follows a similar pattern to the life science industry as a whole. However, it's been less affected by the recession in 2024. And over the past 2 years, nearly 1,700 jobs have been created in this field. And if we look back to 2014, that's an increase of 228%. On this slide, we see which categories of competences employers are looking for, whether they want pure life science skills or tech skills or a mixture of both. And we see that employers still typically recruit either someone knowing life science skills or tech skills. But over time, two parallel trends have emerged. We're seeing a steady growth in the share of jobs looking to hire people with tech skills, as well as those seeking DDLS skills, meaning candidates who can bridge both fields. And this analysis clearly shows that tech competence is becoming increasingly valuable in the life science industry. And recent advances in technology now make it possible to perform faster, more precise, and entirely new types of analysis on large data sets. And as a result, it seems that employers who hire people with tech skill might gain a real competitive advantage. Now let's take a closer look at which skills are most in demand within data-driven life science. And GMP once again tops the list, and it appears in 1 out of every 5 jobs. In second place, we have automation, appearing in approximately 1 out of 9 job ads. Third place goes to programming languages, and it's mentioned in every 10th job ad. In fourth place, we find AI or AI skills, appearing in 1 out of 23 job ads. And in 5th place, we find Python programming, also appearing in 1 out of 23 job ads. Next, we looked at each competence's share of all DDLS listings, but also compare the past 2 years with the previous 2-year period. And what we found was that the competences growing in demand are medical technology, followed by AI and Azure. Meanwhile, automation and Python have remained equally in demand, while GMP, regulatory affairs, programming languages, and chemical engineering have declined slightly. In this table, we can see the most common job titles in DDLS listings, and the most common one is software developer. Even though the number of vacancies fell from 101 to 70, it still makes out the same share of all available DDLS job ads, meaning its relative importance is unchanged. Next, I want to highlight a few job titles where we've seen clear changes in demand. So the third most common job title is quality engineer. And here we see an increase both in absolute terms from 51 to 65, but also an increase in relative terms, meaning it makes out a large share of all the available job ads in DDLS. And the same trend is visible for the 5th most common job title, biomedical scientist, where demand also has risen. And for the 6th most common job title, molecular biologist, we unfortunately see a sharp decline, both in the number of vacancies, but also in its share of all DDLS listings. And the same trend is unfortunately visible for the job title, analytical chemist. And finally, for the 10th most common job title, civil engineer in biotechnology, we observe a moderate decrease in demand. On the next slide, I'll share a few practical tips on how to strengthen your profile and position yourself for these emerging opportunities. So, how do you become an attractive job candidate for your dream job? Well, it's always important to look around and do research to see what's happening in the sector you're interested in. And this research can result in a list of organizations that you find the most appealing. And it could also mean reading our magazine Naturvetarna or looking at every corner of what's out there, mapping what's happening in the life science industry. Also network and make sure to use LinkedIn. And if you find an organization you are interested in working for, consider contacting someone from that organization. Perhaps ask them about the organization, but also their career path. And who knows, maybe they want to be your mentor even. Also set up short-term and long-term goals for how you can attain a job at any of these organizations. And do as I do, look at job advertisements. What are they looking for in the list of required qualifications? Are there any qualifications that you can obtain at university? And also be aware that job titles can be misinformative and vague. For example, some jobs with the job title engineer might be jobs where you qualify, although you're not an engineer. And also apply for a part-time job or do voluntary work that gives you experience once you graduate or have your dissertation from university. And lastly, train your social skills when you're building your network, because the organization is hiring you as an individual, not only your CV. Thank you for listening, everyone. It's been a pleasure. And by scanning this QR code, you can sign up and become a member through the link. And before we move on to the Q&A session, are there any questions about the material? So I will wait 1 minute and then I will let you in, Marta, our special guest. Okay, it seems as if everything was crystal clear. We can come back to this later if you... Okay, now we have a question. Do you have any information regarding PhD holders? So if I understand this correctly, you're wondering if I've done an analysis exclusively for those with a PhD diploma. And if that is the question, the answer unfortunately is no. But very often in the life science industry, they're actually looking for people with a PhD. So it's subsumed in the results, but it's not reported exclusively, unfortunately. Thank you so much for your question, Christos. Okay, so it's time to wrap up with a Q&A. So please use this opportunity to ask a young professional in the life science industry about their experiences and perhaps their best do's and don'ts. So you can either write your questions in the chat, I'll keep an eye on that, or raise your hand. So welcome, Marta. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us about your academic background and work experience?
Yeah, thanks, Tobias. Yes, so my name is Marta, and Tobias has asked me to participate in the webinar so that I can give you a bit of a insight into how it has been for me, specifically to move from academia to life science industry. So I will just tell you a little bit about my background and how it was for me to move to life science, and then I hope that you can ask questions in the chat so that I can maybe help with some tips. Yeah, so I originally come from Spain and I moved to Sweden to do my PhD. So that was in 2018. I moved to Lund University for my PhD. And then I finished in 2022. My PhD was in biomedicine, specifically in neuroscience. And then when I finished my PhD, I decided that I wanted to try the life science industry. I was not entirely sure about leaving academia, but I thought I'm just going to try it and then I'm going to see if I have to come back, I will come back. And what happened for me is that it was not easy at the beginning. So I attended a lot of these webinars, to understand better the industry. I went to many courses about drug development, and eventually I landed a job in a biotech company, and this was actually in Copenhagen because it's very common when you are like in the Lund and Malmo region to get a job in Copenhagen instead. But I could still live in Malmo and work in life science industry in Copenhagen, so that worked very well for me. And I found out that I really like working in a biotech company, so I stayed there for almost 2 years before I got an offer from a pharmaceutical company called Lundbeck, also in Copenhagen, Denmark. And then I moved to this other company, and in both cases, my job title was research scientist. So in the first company, which was a smaller biotech company, I was doing imaging and research services for other companies. And now in Lundbeck, where I have been working here for 1 year, I'm a research scientist in the large molecule area. So I just work with drug development and early discovery phases, basically. So that's where I'm at now. I'm still a research scientist and I still really enjoy working in the life science industry. So yes, if you have any questions about how the transition was for me or how it is to work in pharma or in biotech, I hope that I can answer some of your questions.
Thank you so much, Marta. I see that we have a first question. So the question is from Anastasia, and she's wondering, would you have information on how long, this question is of course an average, but I'm assuming you might ask from your perspective, how long it takes for graduates to find a relevant role?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it can take a little bit of time. I think it depends a lot on what you want to do. There is always more demand in some areas than others. I can speak for the research part of companies because that's where I have been most involved. And I think it can take a few months to find a job. And I think sometimes you just have to be like a bit open to maybe getting something that is not exactly what you were looking for and then jumping into what you actually wanted to do later. That's always what I say. But I have seen that it can take a few months to, and it can also extend up to a year, right, to find a job as a research scientist.
Yeah, and that's also the picture I've gotten when I've been speaking to members, but I'm not entirely sure if it's a representative sample, like if I can translate it into numbers yet. But it's what you're saying is something that we're seeing from other members as well when they're sharing their stories.
Yeah, I
And
think
it could
so.
be sometimes because you're very specialized, like you're pushing the boundaries of our knowledge within a specialized subject. And as you said, it's super important to stay open-minded.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so I think we have another question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is Swedish as a requirement for getting a job in the life science industry? Or Danish?
Yeah, I guess I will have to answer in terms of Danish, but then I also have many friends and colleagues that have worked in the Swedish life science industry. So I also get some input from that. And I would say that it's not that important at all. So you can rest assured that you will be fine if you don't speak Swedish or Danish. Like I don't speak any Danish, and that has never, I don't think it has ever impacted any of my interviews or any of the roles that I have had or that my colleagues or friends have had. So I don't think that is so important. But that again is like about research. I don't know whether if you work in regulatory or something that is a bit more like country specific, maybe it's more important. But when it comes to like research or biomedical kind of jobs, I don't think it's so important.
Perfect. And then we have another question. Are internship, are internship positions as a graduate usually paid? Is this something that you have knowledge
Yes.
about?
Yeah, so I can speak for how it is in my company, and I guess that maybe we're speaking about after a master's. And I think that usually after a master's, we have like specific positions for those people that have just finished their master's and they don't have so much experience, and it's called like research assistants, something like that. And those are not internships, but they're like temporal positions, usually a few months or 1 year, and those are paid positions. And you also have the opportunity to do a few months of an internship, and those are also paid. So I don't think I have seen, aside from like master projects, I don't think I have seen any positions that are unpaid in my company.
Hmm. Okay, I think we only have time for, no, we actually have a few more minutes. So the next question is, as a life science job seeker, I could see that many companies require experiences. What do you think as an early stage entry level candidate can do to enter into companies?
Yeah, I think that's one of the trickiest parts. Like they will want some experience from you, and then you just graduated, right? So it's a bit tricky. So what the other person was suggesting, maybe doing an internship, whether it's paid or unpaid. I mean, I said in my company they're always paid, but it might be that other companies do some unpaid internships. At least in Denmark, I know that many people, while they are in unemployment. So I was in unemployment for like 2 3 months after my PhD. And I know that in Denmark, when people are in unemployment, they can get the unemployment fund to pay them to do an internship. And then you can do an internship in the company where you would like to maybe work one day. So that is an option. But of course, you can also do a lot of networking and also try to somehow, get in without this previous experience, and maybe take some entry role positions to start with, that don't require, even if it's not your dream job, just to get some experience in the industry before.
Thank you. So I see that I have a question as well. Is it important to take a course about the GMPs? And well, my answer is I guess it could be good to take a course if the results show that it's the most mentioned, at least, competence. It of course helps to be able to tick that off the box in if you meet the requirements in the desired qualifications. I don't know if you have anything to add, Marta.
Yeah, and I think it also, I mean, when I was in an employment fund, they actually provided access to those courses for GMP, for DLP, all of these. I also took those courses. I mean, I think it only helps in you if you end up working. So, for example, for GMP, if you're working in manufacturing, then it will help you. But if you apply to positions that are in QA, maybe it will not help you as much. It will depend a bit on what you are aiming for. So maybe don't take everything, but if you think that you might be interested in working in that, definitely take those courses. I mean, it doesn't hurt to have and I think there is another question there about the GMP and QA as skills, and whether you can like get those before you start working. And I think it's the same thing, right? Like you can do all these courses and just have it in your CV, and at least that will also give you some input about like what it is to work with those things and whether you like it or not.
Mm. Okay, I'm trying to keep up with the chat. There's messages flowing in biblical proportions. Okay, as a life science job seeker, I could see that many companies. So this one we covered already, right? Exactly, and the certification courses, if it benefits you, that's what you answered. GMP and QA skills. Um, yeah, okay, so Per Holfe is writing, once you get a job, please remember that it is important to learn Swedish or Danish so that you learn about your rights and become aware. We do not require Swedish when you contact us, but just a tip from a legal advisor. And he's one of our best legal advisors at Naturvetarna, so listen to his words carefully. Okay, I think that was all the questions. Do you have anything you would like to add, Marta, before we round up today's webinar?
Yeah, just maybe that, I think that the most important part in the job seeking approach is to try to do as much as networking as possible. So I always invite people to, add me on LinkedIn, send me a message if you want me to like have a chat, have a call, help you with something. It's always good to try to do that with as many people as you meet as possible. Because then you will be able to, one day someone will think of you when a position opens, right? So I think it's the best advice I can give, and feel free to add me on LinkedIn and contact me if you have further questions.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so I see that we have a last question, and that is what counts as a biomedical scientist, just a bachelor or master's in biomedicine? So biomedical scientist is the Swedish equivalent for that job title is biomediciner, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, so that's different from biomedicinsk analytiker, or I'm assuming it's biomedical analyst in English. Um, so yeah, I don't dare saying which one is bachelor and which one is master. I know there's 1 year of university courses. That's the main difference between the two. And we have a message from Haritha wanting to reach out to you on LinkedIn. So we're already seeing how actionable our listeners are today.
I think there is also one more question here about the job hopping.
Okay. Is job hopping common in Sweden/Denmark, staying at one job for 1 to 2 years before moving to another role?
I don't know if you want to say something about that, about the Swedish situation.
Yeah, from what I've heard with our interviews with our members living in Sweden and working in Denmark is that employment security is weaker in Denmark, but at the same time, like the safety system is different. So it's our members at least say it's not as problematic in Denmark to lose your job as it is in Sweden, but that there, of course, it's not fun losing your job and having to go through and consume all that time to find a new job. So I think that what I learned from all these interviews is that it seems to be more of a job hopping phenomenon in Denmark as opposed to Sweden. But I don't have it in numbers, so this is based on our interviews.
Yeah, I also think that I have experienced that there's a lot of job hopping here in Denmark, especially for people that work in smaller companies like in biotech. So, for example, when I was working in the biotech where I was, after almost 2 years, I was like some of the more senior people in my department because people just move around a lot. But then actually, when I moved to pharma, I noticed that people tend to stay for longer. So some of my colleagues have been in my department for like 25 years. So it's just more uncommon. But I think in my age group, I have seen a lot of my colleagues and scientists move in companies very often, like every 2 years. So I would say it's quite common here.
Mm. Yeah, and I noticed that our ombudsman Per Holfe is confirming this, and also his closing remark is be aware though that the Swedish and Danish labor law is not the same. And then we have another colleague of mine mentioning that you can have free membership in the Danish union through our membership in Naturvetarna. And that's free of charge. And then there's a link to your rights as well from Frida Enaheim. So I think, I don't know, have you noticed any questions that I've missed, Marta?
No, I think that was it.
I think that was it as well. So thank you everyone for joining today, and a special thanks to you, Marta, for taking your time and sharing your experiences from the life science industry. It's very much appreciated. So thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.